Good morning, everyone. I think it's 10 o'clock, and it looks at a quick glance like we are probably all present and ready to get started. So I will call this meeting to order at 10:01 a.m. I believe we do have an agenda today. We're going to share the agenda.
Yeah, I can put that up on screen. Maybe.
Maybe.
Gotta find oh, it's right there. Just looking past it. Okay, there we are.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I see a few names that I'm not sure that I recognize. So I don't know if we want to do a quick round of introductions. I think we have possibly some ODF staff that at least I'm not familiar with. So, Mike, do you want to introduce your team?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm the State Forest Division Chief here at ODF. And for ODF folks that are panelists here, let me just kind of go down the list. Why don't we start with Justin?
Good morning, Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst in the State Forest Division.
Cindy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy Kolomachuk. I'm the project manager for the Western Oregon State Forest HCP.
Okay. And Nick?
Good morning, Nick Palazzolo. I'm the Deputy Division Chief for State Forests.
Okay. And Todd?
Morning, everybody. I'm Todd Heron. I'm the Information Unit Manager for State Forests.
Okay. And Tyson?
Good morning. Tyson Weprick. I'm the Adaptive Management Specialist in State Forests.
Okay. And Tim?
Morning, everyone. My name is Tim Holschbach. I'm currently serving as the interim deputy state forester at ODF.
Okay, and things are kind of jumping around on my screen. I think I got all of the ODF staff.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's lovely to see new faces and to be introduced to all of you. So welcome. Happy to have you with us today. Okay, I think we've got introductions. I think as commissioners, welcome everyone. I think we all know one another and are identified on screen, so I will save us the time of going through and announcing. If that's all right with everyone, quick thumbs up unless somebody would really like to introduce yourself.
Chair Scart, I think because this is the first meeting of the year and we do have some new commissioners on our board, I think it might be helpful, but that's your prerogative, but since it's the first one of the year, figured I would point that out.
Thank you, Brandon. We will do that then. So I'm Erin Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner, and I'm just going to call you off as I see you on the screen. Commissioner Bangs.
Good morning, Commissioner Courtney Bangs, Clatsop County Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Tucker.
Commissioner Will Tucker from Lynn County, representing Lynn, Benton, Lincoln, Marion, and Polk counties.
Thank you. Commissioner Magruder.
Good morning, Margaret Magruder, Columbia County Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Willie.
Good morning, Jerry Willie, Washington County Commissioner, District 4.
Wonderful. Commissioner Lovell.
Good morning, Commissioner David Lovell, Lane County, District 5.
Thank you. Commissioner Thompson.
Good morning, Leanne Thompson, Clatsop County Commissioner for District 5 in Clatsop County. That's the southern half of the county.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sweet. I'm going to guess Commissioner Sweet is multitasking as he no longer has the leadership role in this committee. He gets to perhaps do 2 or 3 things at once while he's with us. So Commissioner Sweet, Coos County, happy to have you with us, and hopefully he'll be able to pop in a little bit more later. Okay, so I think we have done introductions. I know we also have with us the Chair of the Board of Forestry. Chair Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, Jim Kelly, Chair of the Board of Forestry.
Perfect, thank you. And then, of course, we have with us on the AOC side, staff-wise, we have Mike Buffo. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Mike Buffo, Director of Technical Services with Mason Bruce and Gerard.
Thank you. And of course, the famous Brandon Persinger. Would you like to introduce yourself? Although I'm sure everyone knows you.
Good morning, everyone. Brandon Persinger with the Association of Oregon Counties, here as the Executive Director for the Council of Forest Trust Land Counties.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, did I miss anyone? I don't think that I did. Okay, so we can just continue through our agenda. I know there's an opportunity here for public comment. Did we have any public comment today?
We didn't receive any in the email ahead of time. And for those of you online, if you'd like to provide public comment to the committee, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen and we will give you that opportunity. Seeing no takers at this point, give them another 30 seconds maybe to find that button. But it doesn't look like anyone wants to provide any comment this morning. So if that changes, I will definitely let you know after we get through the next topic here.
Thank you, appreciate that. All right, I think the next opportunity is for the Chair of the Board of Forestry to provide any comments that he would have for us. So Chair Kelly, anything you would like to share this morning?
Well, not in particular. I thought that, if there are questions about what's going on with the process to replace replace the state forester, I'm happy to address that. Is that something everyone is interested in? Okay, thought you might be. Well, if those of if anybody is not aware, the governor's office has introduced a bill that I'll try to summarize pretty quickly, but traditionally the Board of Forestry has been in charge of hiring and firing the state forester. And but in effectively, no state forester can really be successful unless they have the support of the governor's office and the legislature as well as the Board of Forestry. And one of the challenges, I think, in terms of our hiring a new state forester, certainly what we experienced last time, is that the tradition had been a fairly public process with a lot of input from different groups and all. But that also involved that the finalists we would have 3 finalists. There would be a public process where they were able to be interviewed by different people and groups and so on, and then somebody would be selected. That certainly had some advantages, but it had big disadvantages as well, because it basically meant that, if you were the state forester in another state and had a good job, but were interested in this job, you were not going to apply. Typically the best people already have a job. So what it did effectively is really limit the number of people who would apply. And it also, I think, advantaged people from within the department for better or worse. But I can also say, having been through that process, that we ended up with a really thin candidate pool the last time. So basically, the governor is suggesting that what they would like to see happen is something where they essentially they nominate someone and then they're confirmed by the Senate. That is a process that is typical, actually, and up for other agencies, so it's not unusual. I think the other big change is that it's been required in statute that the state forester have practical forestry knowledge. So that has effectively meant that they needed to either have forestry education or experience. And they are trying to change that so that that won't be a requirement. It would be a requirement for either the state forester or their deputy, and as I understand it. Again, I think the argument there is that you have a big, complex agency, and they want to be able to get the best executive talent that they can get. That's what they would argue, and I don't argue with that. Given my experience, I think that's going to make some people uncomfortable. I really haven't heard much initial reaction to what is being suggested. So meanwhile, that's a possible legislation out there, and I think the Board of Forestry has to presume make the assumption that the status quo is the status quo and proceed with the process of hiring a state forester under current law. On the other hand, I think the governor's office is encouraging us with a go slow approach, and Kate Skinner is showing herself to be a very competent interim manager. I wish I could tell you how we're going to navigate this, but I think we're going to be navigating it a little bit slowly. I think trying to give the department and Kate some time to fix some problems and deal with all of the stuff that has been happening over the last 6, 8 months that has taken everyone's eye off the ball. As you can all imagine, it has not been a particularly pleasant time to being, for ODF. We've had so many kind of, for the most part, ridiculous stories in press and so on, that have been so disconnected from facts, and that's been very hard, I think, on the morale of the department. Yeah, it's not been a particularly fun period, but I think we're at the point where I think things are going in a lot better direction, and hopefully the board is able to focus more on the policy issues that we should be able to should normally be able to be our job instead of all these distractions. But welcome to ask or to answer any other questions, and any feedback that anybody has on any of that would welcome as well.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. We appreciate that. That was actually a part of our next agenda item. So you've just kicked us off into that conversation, which I think is helpful, obviously, for all of us looking at who will be the state forester as well as the deputy state forester, very important pieces of the conversation. And we will be meeting CFTLC to talk about the bills in the legislature and whether we want to come out in a supporter or oppose or a neutral in the next coming weeks. So I think it's a great opportunity for commissioners here. If you have questions that you'd like to ask Chair Kelly related to the staffing, I think it's a good time to do so. So any commissioners with questions or comments? Unusual for us that we don't have. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. You may lead us off. Commissioner Tucker, you'll follow Commissioner Thompson.
Couldn't resist.
Thank you.
Chair Kelly, you're welcome. Chair Kelly, speaking as a person, as an individual, you have my trust and confidence in your leadership and in the way the department is moving forward. Thank you and best wishes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tucker.
So I do worry about this, and I know it's not your choice, the process replacing Cal as being a little bit more political. And so I worry about that. I had really liked to see this, and I hope you guys still have an active role in putting forward names. And so I just worry a little bit about it being a little more political. I also am concerned about maybe I should get a hold of the acting director, but I am concerned about operations during a time where we are in transition. And so I will get a hold of Kate and directly outside of here and share my concern about revenue and where funding is going to come from, because that is going to be part of the conversation about what we lobby for. But with expenditures exceeding revenue for the Board of Forestry, you're facing some hard decisions, and I would love to have making sure that we have the right eye on that and in that watching and keeping that under control, because it is it is not a good time to be losing millions of dollars a year when we got wildfires and other things behind us. Anyway, I thank you.
I agree with you on that. I just also want to point out you're not the first person who said, that they're concerned that this will leave the selection of a state forest or make it into a more of a political process, and that they wish that we had that insulation from that. And somebody else said, well, in fact, we haven't had a state forester make it past 3 years anyhow. So the issue of changing guard isn't a big one, not in the recent past, that's for sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Banks.
I kind of echo that concern. Though I do acknowledge that we've had turnover over the last 3 years. I just worry that as turnover occurs in the Senate, that this potentially would equate to turnover in this position. And I do worry about that because I think above all, the department needs stability. And then the other concern that I just bring forward is that it's going to slow down the process. And I agree, Kate Skinner is a wonderful replacement. But the sooner that we can reach stability and a solid, individual leading the department, the sooner I feel like a lot of the issues that are currently occurring will stabilize. And I do want to state that I would like to see the Board of Forestry take an active role in the selection, even if it is turned over to the governor's office, just because you guys are going to need to be working in conjunction with each other for the entirety of the service of this person's term. And so to see if it goes all the way over to the governor's office, I just worry about continuity between the department, the board, and then, we're adding, obviously the governor's office is already there, but it just would need to be a very cohesive, supportive situation for all entities in order for this to have stability. I think the lack of stability has been because the different entities have been struggling, potentially, including struggling with us as county commissioners. And so, and it would be nice to have one of our forest trust land commissioners be able to be a seat at the table for interviews, because that individual needs to be able to work with us. So those are just my thoughts and my concerns. So, but I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, Chair Kelly.
Commissioner Banks, for what it's worth, the governor's office and the person of Jeff Huntington assures us that we will continue to have a role in the process, but for what it's worth.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Commissioner Willie.
Well, I guess just to follow up with that, Chair, thanks for this information. It's been very good. The timeline, obviously, we know that they are in the early stages of a long session, so it's going to be June. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to take their attention away from this. So is there a timeline that we'd like to go through? And is there some way that this organization, this group, Council on Forest Trust Land Group, weigh in a little bit on this to encourage maybe the governor to not make this political, and let's take it through the normal process? Again, it's going to be very important, obviously, that we have somebody there that has the full support of not only the department, but certainly of the commissioners of the trustland counties. And so can you give us a little background, a little bit more about the timeline of this and how we could maybe have a little bit more influence early on?
Well, I wish I knew the timeline. And as mentioning, this is kind of a dicey situation to be in, but it would be irresponsible for us to just hold off and do nothing with the assumption that this legislation. So I think I've got to have some more conversation with the governor's office. I can't tell you anything exactly. I think that I'm going to guess that we will include some process in our April meeting to start soliciting feedback and input from the public and from FTLAC, as well as the other organizations that regularly are in front of us and people. So that's I don't know what kind of pushback I'll be getting from the governor's office, but clearly I can't just like, oh well, let's put that to the side for 4 months. So that's just not that would be irresponsible. So I wish I could give you a little bit better answer, but I don't have it today. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. So I'm curious, it says in the bill apparently that the state forester does not need a forestry background as long as the deputy state forester had that background. Is that correct?
One or the other, as I understand it. I haven't really reviewed the language, but that's what I was told that it was the intention. So if anybody's read it and tells me differently, but
Okay.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It seems very, very important that at the upper echelons of leadership in the organization, there be somebody that understand the content with which, their management decisions are affected by. So I completely understand the desire to look for the best executive possible, but boy, it's a scary concept to think that you could have someone with zero forestry experience making the kind of very impactful decisions that are made by the state forester. With that thought process, how is the deputy state forester selected? Is that just a standard state hiring process? And who has input into that conversation in terms of Board of Forestry, public, et cetera, if that ends up being this, key opportunity to have forestry experience?
Well, historically, that has just been a choice of the state forester. And the board really's role, his role specifically is not supposed to be around interfering with personnel issues and operational issues. So technically, we can always just express our displeasure with a state forester, but we really don't manage those kinds of decisions. I will say, I mean, there is such a huge wealth of forestry knowledge in the department. And I laugh when I hear all of this because and maybe none of you remember, but I had no forestry background before I came on the board, and before long I was chair. So it's and I've had to rely very much on others and other board members, people like Joe Justice and all who have huge deep knowledge of forestry, and so what can I say?
And I share that as a commissioner. My experience is a mile wide and an inch deep on a lot of things, and I rely on my experts. I think the concern comes at a level when if the state forester becomes politicized and they are selecting the deputy, we certainly have seen the opportunity for the entire direction, maybe currently not getting political, of the federal government to be shifted by a couple of key people near the top to things that one thought was absolutely a given. We could never go there, and we do. So I think that's part of the concern of the politicization potentially of this position, the ability for them to choose their second in command that could completely change the face of how state forests are managed, and it would be their right and responsibility to do so. I understand there's a lot in statute to protect us, right, with the greatest permanent value and the different things, but in light of the current environment of the world.
There's a big difference between the way we would all like it to be and the way the reality is. One of the things I've learned is when you're chairing a board or running an agency, you do not win a battle with the governor's office, period. That's the political reality, period.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Banks, one more question here.
I just want to echo what Commissioner Scar just stated regarding the concerns of politicizing this particular position. I don't want to be on a pendulum swing every 4 years or every 2 years. I feel like that would be devastating to all of us, no matter which direction the pendulum was swinging. And then on a side note, don't shortchange yourself on forestry knowledge, Chair Kelly, mainly just because farming is extremely similar to forestry, and you've got that in spades. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Any other questions on this before we move on to our next topic on the agenda? Okay, not hearing any. Chair Kelly, thank you so much for your candidness and your willingness to have a very open dialogue with us. We always appreciate that opportunity.
You bet.
Okay, we will move on to planning context. And Justin, I think you're going to chat with us a little bit about that.
Yes, though I think actually up next is the personnel and staffing updates. There's a few
Oh,
more.
there's more than that one. Sorry, thank you. I figured
Yeah.
we'd cover that. So yes, that would be great. So let's hear about the other personnel updates.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you. Again, Mike Wilson, State Forest Division Chief. So everybody knows that Kate is in the acting state forester position. And on a personal note, I'll say that's really great. Not only does she bring a wealth of experience, but she is a great boss. Just so I know that all of the commissioners also have district level contacts as well. And so just so everybody knows, Ed Walmark, who is normally the protection unit supervisor down there in up there in Tillamook, is currently serving as the district forester there and will do so, I believe, through at least the end of the biennium. Also, Tim Holschbach has introduced himself. He has stepped in as the interim deputy state forester. On the protection side, we have a new division chief, Michael Curran, who was formerly the West Oregon District Forester, is in that job, and that's a great addition to our executive team for sure. In his place down on West Oregon District, Matt Thomas is currently the acting West Oregon District Forester while they go through that recruitment process. Mike Caffaretta, who most of you know, is also doing a little bit of a detail. This is a temporary assignment and it's associated with the Salmonberry Trail initiative there. And in his place, Stephanie Beal is currently serving as the Forest Grove District Forester. So those are our internal staffing updates. We also have a new board member. As most of you know, Bob Van Dyke decided not to re-up as a board member. And in his place, we have a recently confirmed Alexi Lavecchio, who has joined us here. And I'd just like to give her a moment to introduce herself and to you all.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Alexi Lavecchio. Yeah, recently confirmed. I'm very excited. This is a new experience for me. So feeling nervous, excited, just all of the feelings, but really looking forward to this opportunity. I live in Ashland, Oregon, so Southern Oregon. I've been here for about 6 years. I have spent a lot of my career in the forestry world, whether working for the Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management, conducting vegetation surveys. I've worked on a lot of forest policy issues in Southern Oregon and also have been part of many forest collaborative projects on Forest Service lands. So bringing in diverse stakeholders and making sure that we're creating projects that everyone's values are incorporated and that the community supports. Wildfire is a pretty big issue in Southern Oregon, so that's been a big focus of mine. And I currently work for a nonprofit called EcoTrust that focuses on the intersection of equity, the economy, and the environment, and currently working with tribes throughout the region to help their natural resource departments and sort of add technical capacity to their forestry department. So helping them write forest management plans and market their timber as a climate smart commodities and helping them, sort of market their timber. So that's my background, and I am extremely honored and really looking forward to serving on the Board of Forestry, and I'm sure I'll get to see and meet everyone throughout my term. Thanks.
Great. And also, I'd like to maybe do a little bit of a go back. And I introduced Tim. Tim introduced himself. I didn't know if Tim wanted to say any more about his background before we move on.
Sure, I'll share a little bit about myself. So my name is Tim Holschbach. Previously, before he'd asked me to step into the interim deputy position, I've been with our protection division, serving as the deputy chief of policy and planning over on that side of the house. I bring a bit. My background is field forestry and also wildlife management, so bring some of those aspects there, and happy to assist the department and work through some of your interests as well and support Michael and the State Forest Division. So excited to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to just introduce myself.
All right, and I think that's all we have for staffing updates.
All right, thank you. Well, it's wonderful to meet everyone. And Alexi, welcome. We look forward to working with you at the Board of Forestry and learning a bit more about your background, and certainly would love to share our backgrounds and our areas with you. So if you find the opportunity to visit any of our trust counties, we do hope you'll reach out and connect with the commissioners there and learn more about what timber means to us in our communities. Thank you. Okay. With that, we will wrap up the planning and staffing updates, and we will move to the planning context. Justin.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just share. We've prepared just a real brief presentation, so everyone's able to see. Hopefully, PowerPoint slides on your side. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So good morning. As I introduced myself earlier today, Justin Buttress. I serve as the policy analyst in the State Forest Division. Just wanted to provide a little bit of context and a kind of a high-level overview briefly for everyone this morning around state forest planning. There's been some questions from a few different folks recently, and so help to clear the air here a little bit and get everybody on an even footing. So what we have as far as our overall planning framework, we have a few different types of plans that we use: the forest management plan, the implementation plans, our annual operations plans. Of course, as everyone knows, we're working on a habitat conservation plan as well. And then, of course, money makes the world go round, so can't do any of that without fiscal and biennial budgeting as well. So much of our direction for the planning framework is codified in our forest management planning rule, which is OAR 629-035-0030. The entirety of that rule can be found on the Secretary of State's website. I can send a link out if people are having trouble finding that and they want to read that. I'm not going to cover that whole rule this morning. We're really just going to focus in on some of the key elements to provide that Reader's Digest version. So first is a requirement in that rule that the state forester develops forest management plans to achieve greatest permanent value. So we're required to have FMPs, pretty simple. Next, the rule establishes that the board is free to review, modify, or terminate an FMP at any time, but they also must do a review of the FMP at least every 10 years. So there's really no time frame established for how long or short those plans can be, but they do have to be reviewed for that greatest permanent value context at least every 10 years. Third, the rule requires the state forester to develop other plans for carrying out the forest management plan. These plans are described as being smaller scale and more specific than the forest management plan. And the planning rule requires the FMP to be adopted as an OAR. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped one. The board must review the FMP to ensure it meets greatest permanent value. So we always have to take our FMPs to the board and have a formal finding by that board that the plan meets greatest permanent value. And then after that's done, the FMP must be adopted as an OAR. And finally, the state forester is directed to implement the forest management plan through the aforementioned more specific plans. So to dig into each of those plans a little still finds that that plan is meeting greatest permanent value and there's no changes that they would like to make, then that plan can continue. And we did actually go through this process just a few years ago on our current plan. It needed a 10-year review. So if it's not broke, it doesn't have to be fixed. They do not contain, or they provide high-level policy direction from the Board of Forestry to the state forester on how to achieve greatest permanent value, but they do not contain harvest levels. Since this is a board-adopted, board-approved Oregon Administrative Rule, or OAR, and the board is by statute precluded from directing or scheduling timber harvest, the harvest level just does not appear in the forest management plan. They do contain, by the planning rule, there's a requirement for implementation guidelines to be established in the FMP. So the direction for the implementation plans, the next level of planning, is generally found in that FMP itself. So implementation plans are district level. The planning rule isn't very prescriptive with respect to the details of those implementation plans. So I'm just going to cover what's in the current approach. So implementation plans are district level, and each district, with the exception of one, contain multiple counties. So, you know, in the context here of multiple counties and representation here, you know, each district might have you know, 2 or 3 counties that has lands or more that it's managing. The plans do contain a 10-year harvest level, and they also contain the associated annual harvest objective for each of those districts. So we set a 10-year objective, and then we essentially divide that by 10 and seek to achieve that annual harvest objective each fiscal year. And these plans are approved by the state forester. And then getting into more fine scale, geographic and temporal scale, we have our operations plans. Our operations plans are district specific, and they address specific operations that are planned for one fiscal year. These plans are approved by the district forester. So timber sale plans, timber sale projects, recreation projects, road improvements, anything like that that we hope to achieve in one fiscal year is going to be reflected in the operations plan. So how it all fits together in again, a high level kind of simplified fashion. The FMP provides the overall policy framework that's used for integrated forest management, and the HCP establishes requirements to be implemented in the IPs as well, but those are primarily focused on ecological standards as well as research and monitoring. So we have that forest management plan that's just providing that very high level, broad policy and integrated management. So all resources, all forest resources considered, from air quality and cultural resources to the timber asset itself are covered there. So then that framework of the forest management plan supplemented with the HCP is then implemented through 10-year implementation plans. These plans provide the harvest objective for the 10-year period. And again, following our current practices, those are district scale and 10-year. I think I said that, but anyway. Courtney, you've got your hand up. Happy to pause for a moment.
Yeah, I did. Am I allowed to ask a question at this point?
Sure.
Is that good, Chair Scar? Okay. I'm getting a feeling of watching this table or this graph as it's traveling across my screen, that you're setting up a 70-year FMP. That's kind of what I'm getting the feeling of, that it'll be reviewed every 10 years. I'm just going to call in concern right now. Your habitat conservation plan is still yet to be approved by services. I'm finding myself in disbelief that it will be approved by services at all very soon. I don't foresee that it's going to get approval in the next, 4 years, as the last conversation that we had with Mike Wilson. And so I'm just struggling with setting up this process. I've talked about the House of Cards a number of times about how if one of the cards gets pulled out, like the Habitat Conservation Plan, because it fails at the federal level, we've then got our entire house collapsing. And so I'm just wanting clarification. Are we going that direction with what you're showing us today? Or are we still going to be very thorough in our FMP process every decade?
So the forest management plan, it does have that 10-year review. I think the expectation with the one we're working on now, given the time frame of the HCP, is that those two things would be adopted simultaneously and implemented simultaneously on a similar or same time frame. So I think it's fair to say that if the HCP is approved and it's approved for 70 years, that the FMP that joins it would also be expected to implement the policy direction for, or provide the policy direction for that same time frame. With the 10-year review cycle, of course, that's baked into the planning rules. So if it's not achieving the goals that are laid out and is not achieving greatest permanent value, as we continue to develop performance measures, there will be that feedback loop to the board on, is this plan working? And that's where that 10-year or more frequent review of the plan by the board will come into play. I don't believe, and I'll look to Mike to correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but I don't believe there's an expectation at this point to adopt the forest management plan without having that HCP approved. This FMP goes.
That's correct. And if I could just have a little bit of a go back, when we talk about 4 years, we're actually still expecting at this point, and we still are working with the services to timeline it out more precisely. But we expect that we should be able to have an approved HCP with ITPs, incidental take permits, in early, well, not necessarily, sometime in the first half of 2026. Now, there's a lot up in the air with the feds right now, obviously, with their capacity and their staff and stuff, and that's a whole nother rabbit trail, right? But as we do expect to have that, what we have talked about, however, in the past is we would expect the full implementation rollout of the new FMP with brand new IPs associated with it to be fiscal year 2028. So that would be in July 1, 2027 is when we roll that out. And we are currently in the process. We just opened the public comment period the other day on our revising the current implementation plans to extend to cover that gap.
Okay. So just a couple more points here, and actually we can pause for questions before we move on to the next topic. So so that's implementation plans. Then we have the annual operations plans. So timber sales, as I mentioned previously, this is where those are described, and those are operationalizing the implementation plan, all of the projects, the timber sales, et cetera, that go into that. These are the short-term plans, fiscal year, still district scale. And each of these, as I also mentioned previously, are sort of designed to achieve 1/10 of the harvest level that's articulated in an implementation plan. And it's always, and it's about 1/10 because we might have a year where the harvest didn't quite meet what we were expecting, and we might throw an extra sale in there, and it's a little bit more than the 10th, or it might be, the other way around, that harvest exceeded that 10th, and we need to make an adjustment there for that. So those timber sales generate revenue, and a portion of that revenue, of course, is retained by the department to manage state forest lands. So the level of the harvest that's achieved through the AOPs feeds into the funding level and informs decision making about projects to be conducted. So that two-way feedback loop on the fiscal budget is sort of there reflected in the annual operations plans. So that is what I had to cover this morning. Happy to take questions, and I do see Commissioner Banks has her hand up.
So the IPs are built off of the FMP, and we have 2025 and 2026 already written and approved. So you foresee that the FMP and the you foresee that the HCP is going to be approved and the FMP will be ready in order to write new IPs for 27 and 28?
That's for fiscal year 2028 is when we would have the new IPs under a new forest management plan.
Did we get IP 2027 already?
The extension covered 27 as well.
Oh, okay. The extension covered 27 as well. All right. Thank you.
Jumping in, are those IPs out for comment right now? Is that the extended IP that's actually out for comment right now? I think I got something yesterday or the day before indicating that for the 2-year extension that they're out for comment.
Yeah, I think it went out yesterday.
And just to be clear on that as well, those are extended for that timeline for 2 years because, again, as our contingency here, hopefully not having to use it, but if something were to fall through, then we have something for 2028 to be able to start, be able to do our annual operations planning from. But the intent is really to get everything wrapped up and be able to get those new IPs.
Commissioner Banks, go ahead.
Is anyone by chance working on the contingency plan that this HCP is not approved by federal services? Or are we just putting every egg and every chicken and all of the things in this one basket?
We're talking about it. We're just recently recognized the need to do so, given sort of the rapid pace of change in the federal government. So,
okay.
Yeah, we're sort of looking at what the pathways are.
Okay. I appreciate the forward thinking. Thank you for talking about it. I would like to talk about it too, probably not today, but I might be sending some emails to you, Mr. Wilson, to discuss thoughts just in that regard, because it's not, the future does not look bright. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you for that update. Any other questions on the planning context? I appreciate that. I know there was some confusion about the FMP in 70 years and how it got looked at. And I think that at this point we have clarity as to what the process looks like. So that's helpful.
Yeah, happy to help out with that. So if there are any other questions, happy to take them. Otherwise, I think we might be ready to move to the, oh, I do. Okay.
Sorry, just when you thought you were done, Justin, I apologize. So the comment period for these new IPs is open until March 21st. What is the plan for I guess, when do they become fully operational? When do you guys approve them?
Nick or Mike, do you guys have that timeline in front of you?
I don't have the timeline open right now, but basically, the process is, so the public comment period closes and we're able, then to move forward, we have to, reconcile comments and consider all that input. And then, once that's done, the state forester would approve that IP. We're already set. We're already, setting up our AOP under the so this is basically a revision, right, of the current IP. It's an extension. And so we're already setting up, our fiscal year 26 annual operations plans, and those will be coming out. I'm not exactly sure when they'll be out, but next month and a half, you'll see those hit the streets for public comment, or month, as usual, because those are the ones that we really have to get wrapped up more by a deadline of June 30th, so that we can start, or very soon after, so we can start offering up sales that come out of those AOPs. But yeah, the IP actually, getting it extended is really about the next AOP coming up, making sure that we can do our planning there. So the timeline on that is a little looser when the state, there's not quite a time crunch for the state forester to approve that as with the AOPs.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Feel free, Nick, and then I'll, I guess, ask my
I also don't have the spreadsheet handy, but the planning unit has sequenced it very carefully to try and get through that 26 AOP public process in time to have it approved. So they're thinking closely about, okay, the IP closes here, the AOP opens here, and we get to June 30th with an approved AOP for 26.
Okay. So I guess I would just flag for the FTLAC commissioners and for the department that in the draft IPs that are out for public comment now, to set this up for your AOPs to take effect in June and subsequent years until we have the other plans in place. We're still looking at 0 potentially board feet out of the Southwest unit. And I understand the issues around the T&E species and everything that y'all have to mitigate for down there, but just want to flag that there are quite a few counties in the southwest portion of the state that are trust land counties that are looking at potentially another couple of years of 0 harvest. So thank you, Commissioner Scar, for letting me jump in there.
Absolutely. Any comment related to that, either Nick or Michael, before I let Commissioner Bangs ask her next question?
Nothing specific. I would say that some of our lands down there in Josephine County especially are, one is we have a very small geographic footprint down there. And so, the rate at which things come up to be scheduled for harvest is just naturally a little more intermittent. We do have there are a lot of T&E constraints down there as well, but we also have, it's not the best ground we have. We do have some good productive ground down there. Some of it is not, doesn't lend itself as much to frequent management. So that's part of the issue down in that part of the state.
Thank you. Commissioner Bangs, and then we'll look to move on to our next topic.
Yeah, so how flexible so you just stated that the FMP can be canceled at any point in time. How flexible are the IPs once they're passed through and written? Are we stuck with them all the way through 2028? Or, given there could be abundant change that occurs on our landscape with the HCP, or are they flexible also? Could they be canceled at any point in time? And then how are you dealing with survey concerns? Because you don't have an HCP, you still have to survey in order to cut. So how are you going to be dealing with all of that in the next 4 years, basically until 2028?
I'll take the last part of that first. And yeah, we do have to maintain our survey coverage and incur those expenses until we actually have the incidental take permits. in hand. So that's unfortunate because it means we have to start surveys that we might not even need to finish. Because just so everyone's aware, the survey protocols that are most significant to us, which are northern spotted owls and marbled murrelets, are each 2-year survey protocols. So that just kind of is what it is. When it comes to IPs, it is very much in the realm of possibility to revise an IP as we're doing now. And let's say we had a total change in strategy and direction, we could, yes, indeed revise those IPs, continuing to function under our current forest management plan, even if the new one doesn't come to pass, right? So we would continue to function under our current plan. We could revise those IPs, but we'd also have to go back and consider the draft forest management plan we're working on. Can we still, revise that to a point where we can make it functional under what would then again be a take avoidance strategy? And we could do that. One of the issues, right now, the conservation actions in the HCP really form the standards for endangered species management. Whereas, that currently is just take avoidance. And the other side, and it also kind of does a little bit of a double duty, if you will, in terms of other conservation objectives that are in our current forest management plan, right, that are not in this new plan. And so we would have to find a way to build some of those standards into the new plan, whatever those standards look like. They might look very different than the HCP, but we would have to we'd have to come up with something there. So there'd be work to do there, even if we were able to continue with the basic framework of that plan. With the IPs, I should say this, revising the IPs, it is a quicker turnaround perhaps than revising an FMP. However, it does take some time. Obviously, we're doing it now in order to be set up for 27 and hopefully not, but potentially 28, right? So that just, it's that time lag that we need, because our planners really need that IP as their basis for then doing the actual nuts and bolts of an annual operations plans.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm sorry, Commissioner Banks, I'm going to go ahead and move us on. We're already 10 minutes behind our agenda time. So appreciate the conversation. I think there's a lot that we all learn every time we get to dig into understanding at a greater depth how the processes at ODF work. And we do all know there's a huge amount of uncertainty. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and move us on. Thank you. We're going to move it to Todd, who's going to just give us a little bit of an update. We know we're mid-modeling, and I think Mike Buffo may jump in as well and give us a little bit of his perspective from the trust land side. So take it away.
All right. Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Todd Herron. I'm the Information Unit Manager for State Forests. And I'm just going to give you try to keep it brief, an update on where we're at with the modeling associated with the Board of Forestry scenarios that we developed. So as you recall, back in November, we met with the Board of Forestry and you all to develop some scenarios to better explore the breadth and the scope of potential implementation strategies using our model. Recognizing that the modeling that we did previous December past left a lot to be desired in terms of the range of outcomes. So we've been working to implement those modeling scenario packages. We are expecting to share those results with the board at the meeting in June. June this year. Coupled with that, coupled with the outcomes will be a discussion about the trade-offs, right? So these modeling scenarios will look very different than the outcomes from these scenarios will look very different than what we've seen in previous exercises. So there'll be an opportunity to have a discussion with the board about the trade-offs kind of implied by those outcomes. And given that discussion, we then would expect to be able to get some guidance from the board around performance measure criteria later in September. That would eventually inform the initial implementation pathways for those new IPs, as Mike and others described. And so like I said, we're on track for June. We're a little bit behind time. We were hoping to be a little bit further along. It's been kind of a slog to get those scenario rule sets put together. Had a few hiccups and along the way, but it's coming together, and look forward to presenting those results. The next slide, Justin. So as y'all probably recall, we came up with 4 overarching scenarios. Each one of those scenarios had some alternative runs to explore, variations on that specific theme. Scenario 1 is the scenario that was requested by FTLAC, specifically looking at opportunities to essentially fix the harvest level for 30 years off of Board of Forestry lands in particular. Whereas the previous modeling included all lands, right? So the harvest level that was indicated was across all lands. And so the primary goal of this would be to fix that harvest level off of Board of Forestry lands for 30 years, effectively the management time frame for the HCA's, habitat conservation areas. And so within that, we wanted to explore 3 different harvest levels and evaluate the trade-offs subsequent to that 30-year time period in terms of, is there a decline in harvest after that time period? And if so, what's the magnitude of that decline? Let's see, scenario 2 wanted to explore the effect of longer rotation, so targeting long rotations, specifically 150-year rotation ages, or out to 150-year rotation ages, and 120-year rotation ages. And the goal there would be to effectively balance the age class distribution as soon as possible. So there's given the imbalance of our age class structures across the forest, it will take some time to get to those longer rotation ages in a balanced fashion. And so the model rules are set up to hasten that the regulation of those age classes. The third scenario wanted to explore the effects of maximizing for volume. So run A would direct the model to just maximize total volume over time, irregardless of the periodic fluctuations. So allowing the model to seek out the management pathways at the stand level that effectively maximize harvest over time. And then optionally constrain that with a 10% periodic fluctuation. So more of an even flow scenario, plus or minus 10% periodically. And those are 5-year time periods. So within the model, it would be allowed to vary plus or minus 10% annual harvest volume each 5-year period. And then finally, scenario 4 looks at maximizing for net present value subject to a 4% discount rate. And again, the first run would allow for unlimited periodic variations. So presumably under a net present value scenario, there's a high level of high value harvest occurring in the initial time periods. And then as time allows, we'll report on the effect of constraining that periodic variation to a 10% and a 30% window. Okay, so specifically for scenario one, which looks at harvest on Board of Forestry lands for 30 years, we are implementing it for all three of those harvest levels, 185, 195, and 205 million board feet annually. The common school lands are in addition to that harvest, so there's an underlying goal to essentially maximize harvest over time for those common school lands, but without a given even flow constraint. The didn't note it earlier, but management within the harvests or within the habitat conservation areas for that 30-year time period, the goals are effectively the same the goals are the same for each of those scenarios. The outcomes are slightly different just because of the nuances of the rule implementations, but the overall harvest for the 30-year time period is effectively the same. Let's see, something's missing here. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So again, the goal of this scenario is to look at the effect of fixing that harvest rate, the effect of, and then looking at the management within the HCAs as an input to those harvests, and then evaluate the trade-offs in future harvest and have a discussion about the outcomes. I see Commissioner Tucker has his hand up. Happy to
Go ahead, Commissioner Tucker.
Just wanted to clarify, when you talk about 195, 185, 195, 205, looking at those as targets, you said that was including common school funds lands, but the slide says common school funds lands are additional. Just want to make sure that we are, when we talk 185, 195, 205, we're talking forest trust lands and not the combination of forest trust plus the common school.
Thanks. Yeah, perhaps I misspoke there. The 185, 195, 205 is from the Board of Forestry lands specifically, and then any additional harvest off of the common school lands would be in addition to those numbers.
Thank you.
The thing that's not mentioned here is at the district level, we did impose a bit of an even flow constraint at the district level for that 30-year time period, just to avoid avoid some drastic periodic fluctuations that the model was inclined to do. So at the district level, those harvest levels will fluctuate a little bit, but not significantly. Mike? Buffalo?
I was wondering if maybe if you're going to show the other scenarios, if now would be a good time, I could just kind of comment on how we've interacted here, because it mainly relates to these scenarios. Is that all right? Maybe Commissioner Scar?
Yeah, that's fine.
For me to interject here.
Yeah, the next slides we're not really going to delve into the other scenarios.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, I think we've been meeting regularly since we've submitted the initial letter over what the scenarios should look like, what this group of scenarios should look like. And a reminder here is that, a key intent is to look at the different trade-offs between the different scenarios, our three scenarios, and then the other scenarios that ODF is running. And like Todd said, there's kind of two rules in the county's proposal there. It's the harvest level for the first 30 years, and then that non-declining harvest following the reset after 30 years out. And expect those will result in different outcomes. That's where the board can look at those outcomes and look at different trade-offs. But it leaves also a lot open for ODF to kind of explore the space to tell us what it would take to make these harvest levels happen. And that's been, something that Todd and Tyson have been doing. And we've talked a little bit about some issues that I think of as helping the model go forward. So this issue of, maybe slight interannual variation to allow the model to not get hung up on an issue that could, inappropriately change the result when we're talking, the difference between, like, say, 185 or 186 or 184 million feet in a given year, just given the way the model operates. By giving a little flexibility, in some minor areas, it will help it move forward better and give us a result that is really what we intend, which is the big picture differences over a long period between a set of different scenarios. So Todd and Tyson and I have been, and we'll continue to meet regularly on that. And it's clear ODF has been, making progress on these as they've gone along.
Thanks for that, Mike. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so just a little background on the modeling, where we're at in terms of the model's implementation. We're still using the same model that we did back in 2023. There haven't been any fundamental changes to the data. We're using the same yield table inputs, the same spatial inputs. Let's see. Right. And so the goal here is to really evaluate the policy level considerations. These are not going to be implementation plan models per se. There will be another opportunity to visit the implementation planning and the modeling that's more specific to those directions. The model models out 150 years, recognizing that the HCP period is 70 years. The purpose of going out longer is really to ensure that that long-term future sustainability is captured within the modeling context, and that there's not some sort of hidden future shortfall, for lack of a better word. And real quick, the yield tables, as we've discussed, they are what they are. They don't capture, they don't account for large scale disturbances, stochastic disturbances, random things that happen on the landscape. We're not including climate change effects directly. There is inventory uncertainty certainly associated with the yield tables. They're kind of they're based in our forest inventory, and so all of the uncertainty associated with forest inventory comes along with that. There's also limited site-specific silvicultural and logistical considerations embedded in there. Recognizing that operationally over time, things will look different than what was specifically implied by the model. But those are some of the key assumptions and uncertainties. Happy to pause for Courtney there. Commissioner Banks.
Yeah, I would just have a question. When in regards to the length of the model, we've discussed in the past, there's a certain threshold where the models lose relevancy and they go a little bit of wonky. Are you feeling confident that 150 years is still okay, or is there still that risk for these models to not be relevant at that length?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's certainly, as with any model, the further out you go from the current time point, the more general certainty there is. I I think, going out 150 years is still relevant because it gives us an opportunity to look at the effects of near-term management trade-offs and the expected outcomes beyond that time horizon. So, if you think about us, we manage a stand that puts that stand on a certain trajectory. We have to make assumptions about that trajectory for a given stand, and that's through at least through a rotation, and we really should be anticipating a couple rotations, knowing that future management could look very different, but we need to have that anchor, if you will, into the future. Yeah, Mike Buffalo might have some perspective there too.
I'll just offer from a kind of technical modeling standpoint, it's probably a good duration given the longer rotations that ODF is typically using. From a kind of a policy expectation perspective, of course, with the HCP, coming to an end in 70 years, things will change in 70 years. But also with the FMP under review potentially at least every 10 years, as well as potential future issues from disturbance, for example, or climate change impacts. Certainly the model isn't the future. But we're, like Todd said, getting a good view of what implementation of this set of rules over a long term looks like. But I think that this is something that, for ODF, there's always going to have to be updates and changes made as the circumstances change, as policies change, right? And so for us, really looking at understanding, it seems like what the next 10 years looks like under the FMP is really the question is how good does that harvest level look? Because it seems like once there's a new FMP, things could look completely different.
Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the final component of this is really just context around the outcomes, the reporting that we anticipate, kind of the report package and analysis that will come along with the modeling to help with the trade-offs discussion. And really, it's there's a lot of detail that we can generate from these models, and so we're trying to provide enough detail that it addresses all the particular questions that will arise during the trade-off discussion, but hopefully not overwhelm the conversation with the detail as well. So things like harvest volume and revenue will be included at various spatial and temporal scales, so district, county, Board of Forestry versus common school, inside and outside the HCAs, as well as harvest type, we'll be able to report on. And then the distribution of stand ages, both in the standing in the forest as well as what's harvested, those will be important and have come up as questions, certainly. And so we'll be able to compare the differences among the scenarios over time. Habitat quantity and quality, particularly in regard to terrestrial covered species. These are the HSIs, the habitat suitability indices that are used within the habitat conservation plan, and the components of those HSIs we'll be able to report on over time, both inside and outside the conservation areas. Carbon sequestration and storage, both in the forest as well as harvested wood products. In particular, we're working on improving the harvested wood products component. The modeling that we reported on back in December didn't have a lot of detail in the harvested wood products, so we're working to expand that and standardize it a little bit better. And then all of this will be rolled up into a socioeconomic report as well that will deal with things like income and employment in the region, and as well as recreational opportunities and other aspects related to socioeconomic conditions. I think that's all that I have. Happy to take questions, and if Mike or Tyson or anybody else wants to chime in, please do.
I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for the update, Todd, and just kind of reminding us all what it is that we are going to see at the end of this process. And Mike, both, I appreciate you chiming in and letting us know just kind of how it's going from the perspective of our representative in the room. So thank you for that. We'll look forward to the outcomes on the modeling and the subsequent conversation with the board. Okay, we will go ahead then and move on to our next agenda item, which is updates on the HCP. And we have Cindy with us. Cindy, here you go. Did we just lose her? Oh, there she is.
I just had a glitch with my computer, but it looks like we're good now. Not sure if you heard, but I'm Cindy Kolomachuk, and I serve as the project manager for the HCP. And today I'm going to give you just a little brief update on the work that we have been doing over the past few months. So first of all, we continue to work on the HCP with our team internally as well as with our consultants. And we have made a lot of progress on the HCP as well as the NEPA process. The good news also is that we have not lost any of the key staff from the services as of yet. And they actually are planning to give us an update on their process for the NEPA process, as well as their timeline. This is something we've been waiting for quite some time so that we can sort of line up the actions that we're taking on our end. So it'll be a great way for us to get in alignment with the services and really launch into that NEPA process a little bit more in depth. Now, as Mike said earlier, if we do lose any of those key members of the services, that could impact the outcome of the process in terms of timing. So we'll just be keeping an eye on that. Now, on the HCP side, many of you may recall that in preparation for transitioning to the incidental take permits, ODF has been implementing the primary conservation actions for covered species since FY24. So it's been a couple of years now. And this has actually provided a really unique opportunity for us to make sure that the language in the HCP is operationally feasible. We developed a process so that our staff could give us some feedback on whether or not the language made sense. They can meet the intent of what we were trying to get at. And we got a lot of great feedback from the field. And we worked with the services to make necessary operational edits to that HCP. And I would just mention that we did not change any of the conservation measures. It really was just refinements to the language. Because we have entered into the NEPA process, we can't actually share the full HCP with stakeholders or tribes or anyone really at this point. But what we've done to try to be as transparent as we can is provide a record of key changes on our website. And I believe that Justin is going to be putting that in the chat there. So you'll find them, they're front and center. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always contact me. My contact information is on the website as well. So because we made those changes, oh, looks like we have a question already. Go ahead, Courtney.
So what you're saying is we cannot request a copy of what you submitted to services. Is that a statement that has been made by services, or is that just is that a rule from federal services that because you've now submitted, I guess, your homework to them, that you can't show your homework to anybody else?
That was direction from NOAA Fisheries at the beginning of this process. And that's because it's not a final, they are continuing to work on it. Go ahead, Mike.
I guess maybe following up on Commissioner Banks's question, is that a rule that we could find somewhere in, say, the HCP handbook or some, sort of it seems like it's a public document, and so would be, subject to, for example, public disclosure or otherwise available to the public. I'm kind of uncertain the authority on that kind of restriction on sharing the HCP.
We can certainly ask the services about that. That is a preference that they had for us, and they actually, it's something that we've been implementing just to be in compliance with what they have asked us to do as the applicant. But we can continue to ask them that question.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would make that an official request, that Clatsop County would like to see the HCP that you submitted to federal services. I would imagine Forest Trustland counties would also like to see that, but that is an official request from Clatsop County. And then I know in the past that I've not been able to make public information requests, but I certainly, I am intent on wanting to see this document because granted, I understand that you've shown these one-sheeters, but over the last 2 years since you've had the original public information on the original HCP, I know that there's been abundant changes. And so I would like to see what those changes are for myself, not only that, for my community. And I would imagine Forest Trustlands would also like to see that.
Okay, thank you. I will work with Mike on that.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do with them there for sure. I believe that their hesitancy on that, on the services side, is that, we've given them a revised draft, right, of the HCP. I think they're concerned about changes in process because nothing is final with the HCP until it's final and ITPs are issued and all of that. And I think that's probably their concern. I share your frustration a little bit on that for sure. And we would be more than open to sharing, our work as it progresses. So we'll see what we can do and provide you, if they're not willing to do that, let you know what your options might be for requesting it from them directly.
Yes, I agree with Mike. It is a little bit frustrating on our side too, because when we started this process, we committed to being as transparent as we possibly could to bring folks along. So we're sort of in this tight place of being the applicant, but we'll see what we can get through, and we'll also work with our own DOJ on that as well. And then finally, sort of a newer development is that Fish and Wildlife Service made us aware that there are a few species that may be present in the permit area that are being considered for listing. And there is a provision in the HCP handbook that states that all ESA listed species taken by covered activities in HCP must be covered for permit issuance unless the take is addressed through another ESA mechanism, such as take avoidance. So essentially, we would not be able to get incidental take permits for the covered species and activities that we already have in our HCP, unless we can ensure that we are not taking any other listed species, which is a big watch out for us after a lot of investment in time and resources, and really the need for ESA compliance programmatically. So we, as a team, are working with DOJ to do a bit of an assessment. We are looking at whether the species that we know we probably have on the landscape that potentially may have take, we're looking to see if covering them would require us to add any conservation areas meaning expand any current footprints or have any additional conservation in any way. That way we can continue with our final revised HCP as planned, and we are not constraining ourselves further. So we are doing that analysis right now, and as you can imagine, what we're trying to do here is ensure that at the end of this epic process, we actually get the assurance that the incidental take permits will provide. And go ahead, Courtney.
So point of clarification, you're now exploring whether or not you need to add more land to the HCP conservation areas?
No, we would not add any additional land. That's one of the key pieces is when we're looking at whether or not we would consider adding a species, we would not add any species that would increase any conservation footprint.
Okay.
So the thought is that we have such robust measures in place now that they would be able to cover the additional species in terms of protection and mitigation of any potential take.
Okay, so what about potentially removing species?
We are not right now entertaining removing any species. We haven't been asked by the services to do so. And we don't have any necessary delistings currently. This may change, as you all know, with the administration moving forward. So again, that's why Nick and his team are looking at like, what do we do if this kind of falls apart in terms of if the ESA goes away or if it changes significantly. So it's just really hard to predict what's coming next. Go ahead.
Would adding species trigger another draft EIS process?
That's a great question. We've actually been talking to NOAA Fisheries about that, and that they do not see that as a primary impetus for actually having to start the entire process again. There will be a final EIS that would be shared with the public that you would have every right to comment on.
I'm curious then, what would be the actual trigger to another draft EIS process? Because if we're adding species, I would think that that would equate to the same as removing species in weight. And I would think that that would trigger a second EIS process. So I'm just curious, what's the threshold? Have they informed you what the threshold is?
The threshold is actually, it's interpreted essentially from their attorney, from their solicitors. But I will tell you that the species that are being considered potentially for addition were addressed in the draft EIS in the first go round. So there's information around those particular species in the draft EIS. So that in itself would not trigger a supplemental or having to start the process over. Now, they may need to add additional information based on kind of elevating these species as covered species. And go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Cindy. I just want to maybe restate, I think what you said, just so I'm clear about where we're at. Is it the case that so the conservation measures have been updated for field work? Obviously conservation areas are there. Now you're looking at these other species and determining is this right? If you need to do anything, and if you do, there will be a change in either conservation measures or extent of conservation areas potentially.
But there would not be.
There would not. So
there would not. We would not add a species if there was a requirement that we increase conservation.
Okay. Areas, but the conservation measures
areas.
Potentially would change.
The conservation measures would be sufficient to minimize and mitigate to the maximum extent practicable.
Okay, and so maybe when I say measures, I might be using it the wrong way. I do also mean like the kind of operational stuff, like the that you've made minor changes around. So like how operations work would also be unaffected by these other species. So the HCP itself would be unchanged. It would be just the inclusion or the sort of exclusion of certain species is what's being analyzed at this point.
That's correct. As far I mean, as we know right now, we would, because we haven't decided to cover the species, so we haven't really gotten direction on exactly what would be needed. But we'd certainly, for species where we don't have a lot of information, we would probably need to do some sampling to get some baseline data. So there would be some actions that we would need to take in order to really adequately mitigate any potential take. But it wouldn't be, we're, part of our process is identifying some criteria. And although we may need to expand our aquatic and potentially terrestrial goals and objectives, that would not increase conservation expectations.
From maybe ask following on that a certainty question. So could the HCP provides a lot of certainty around
That's
management
right.
of the species that's included, but there could be a situation where a species that is terrestrial, you go under you don't include in the HCP, but it has a take avoidance. There are take avoidance mechanisms, and those remind me, are those going to be in addition to HCP? So then you would continue to do survey and manage, and as you found that species, potentially, your activities would change.
That's correct. We
Okay.
would need to do take avoidance or any other ESA compliance mechanism in order to cover those species. And Michael, you looked like you had something to say about that.
Yeah, and our objective is to, while there certainly would be, okay, if we add these species, we do some more monitoring for those species and establish a better baseline, right? Because we are in a situation where for some of them, we don't know a whole lot about their occurrence on state forest lands. But we know enough about their ecology that we fully expect that they are covered in the footprint of what we've already established for HCAs and RCAs. So what we want to avoid actually is getting into a survey and manage approach, which over time could become additive. We want to avoid that. We want to have the certainty that it's kind of like, no, even if we find them in these other places, they're also here and being protected, and that's part of the mitigation package, and we're good, right? And that's been kind of an expectation from early on in the process, really. I think we've talked about it before, if species become listed in the future that we haven't already accounted for in our conservation framework, that, okay, look, this is a pretty healthy conservation package here, and we would expect there would be an increase in encumbrances on us, if you will, being able to even amend the HCP 20 years from now for a species we're not even thinking about. But we would expect that we'd be able to accommodate that without creating more constraints on our landscape.
And so that's the analysis that you're kind of doing right now to determine that. And
yeah, well, right now it's for a finite set of species that we're dealing with now, which is a little easier than, who knows what happens 20 years from now.
Totally.
But yeah, that is the kind of thing that we're doing right now.
Will we be able to know the conclusion of that determination of how that shakes out? Because they're kind of going back to that issue of not being able to know within the HCP while working on the HCP. But will we be able to know the answer to this kind of analysis?
Yeah, we can communicate that with you, and that would be something that, well, I mean, we can communicate it with you directly, obviously, through this kind of forum as well. But it would, anything like that would end up being part of the key changes documents, even if we're not successful in getting the services to, release the current draft, or any subsequent revisions or whatever. We would still be tracking those and making sure that you know about them.
I will say I think they sent us 6 species to consider, and we used the same criteria we used at the start of the HCP to sort of vet them, but with the new information. and we landed at 3, we wanted to consider sort of just weighing those risks, right? Because one important point here is it's not just that they wouldn't be able to issue the take permits. They would, as long as they condition those permits with specific take avoidance requirements for those additional species. So rather than get the permits and have take avoidance for them via the permits, that there's that consideration. Do we think it's worth covering? Or do we think it's worth rolling the dice, not covering them? And should they become listed, then we're dealing with take avoidance post facto and trying to amend. So we're weighing all these risks, right? And that's what kind of led us to where we are right now with the species that we are at. And again, with the expectation that covering them shouldn't be much, if any, lift, because that is the framework, as Mike mentioned. This was always the framework for this HCP, was it's robust enough that we should be able to cover anything else that comes up too. Sorry, Commissioner Bangs, you were waiting patiently.
Yeah, I just wanted to break this down into layman's terms and say that, so the plan is to look at these species, and if there is any further constriction on harvest outside of the HCAs in regards to the species, then you're going to review the value of that potential constriction to harvest. And at any point, will that trigger another review or objectives process?
On our,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
No, I mean, for us, yes, like I should have said, and we're staying nimble there too. So, sort of contingent on how this plays out, we may make a different decision. And if it looked like it was going to be, add excessive constraints to get there, then we might be, I think we're probably lean towards taking a risk with take avoidance.
So my concern in that statement is that your idea of bad and my idea of bad are very different ideas of bad, because I mean we've come to loggerheads on a number of issues, just in regards to this HCP and how it was written. And so I am concerned about the transparency of potentially adding more constraints to harvest without communication to the counties. And so my request is open communication immediately to the counties if, in fact, there is any further restriction that is going to be placed outside of those HCAs in regards to this, because already you have gone above and beyond in the matter of leaf trees. And so you've constricted your own harvest outside of the HCAs just in regards to leaf trees. So, at least that was the original HCP that I saw over 2 years ago. I still would like to see the new one. So
I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap us up in this conversation, because I think we have kind of all gotten the sense that there is some additional work that's being done. I think I have heard that you will provide the transparency you can, that you will push back at the services and ask how we get a copy of it. Is a public document? Is it a public request through them if you're not able to provide it, so that we can have our eyes on whatever we can. And then hearing also that you're evaluating additional species, but what I believe I heard was that no additional constraints would be placed under this HCP, that the question would be whether it becomes, you're going to have to deal with it outside the HCP, which is the take avoidance. So I think that's kind of where we're wrapping here. And as you know more, we want to know more. I think that's the key thing. Right now, there's a lot of unknowns, and we could probably keep going down if this, then that in this conversation. But I think it's just, as you know more, we would like to be right along with you, knowing more. So,
Absolutely.
any final words? Did I miss anything or misstate anything there? Okay, perfect. Thank you all. Good, robust conversations. We appreciate the opportunity for an update always. Okay, I know we had promised to try to get everybody out of here at 11:45. We're pretty close to that. We played a little with those extra 10 minutes. So FTLAC upcoming meetings. Brandon or Michael, can you remind me when our next meeting will be?
I can't unless something was scheduled. I was out for a little while. If something has been scheduled.
Justin, maybe you know. I think there's is the next one.
Yeah, I have it here, Commissioner.
Oh, thank you, Brandon.
Yep, the next meeting for FTLAC is scheduled for May. It's scheduled for May 24th. Entirely possible as things develop over at ODF that they might call a special Board of Forestry meeting in the summer. And so we might have a couple pretty close together there, May, June, July, but our next scheduled is May 24th and then August 23rd.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, is there any other burning comments for the good of the order? If there is not, then we will go ahead and adjourn, only 1 minute late today. And just appreciate everybody's time, all the information, the good conversation, and we will all be back together very soon. Take care.
Thank you.